Hello everyone, it's Rad Drew. I'm here to do another tutorial today. This time we'll be looking at the app called Stackables. Last tutorial we talked about formulas. I took you through the Formulas app, which is a companion app to the app that you see on the screen right now in the App Store, Stackables. All of the formulas that were available in the app Formulas were created in this layered texture app called Stackables. And so today I want to take you into a little bit of how it works. And I just want to say before we start, this is a really complex app. Lots of different tools and methods for creating layers and formatting different aspects of those. So we are just going to scratch the surface in today's tutorial. So I hope to just take you through some of what I've learned about the various tools and features of the app and how you can apply it to your images. So let's go ahead and head out there to that app. So I'm going to just swipe down, and if you notice it's already there in my tray under suggested apps. Because I have recently used that app, so I don't even have to type it into my search bar. I just tap on it and open it, and it looks like this when it first comes up. There are a couple of links on this first page. That first up in the right hand corner where it says inspiration, that'll take you out to Instagram, where you can see other apps or other images created with this app. The rest of these things I'm not going to even go into. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up an image for us to work with, and to do that I'm going to tap on the image icon here in the center left or center right. Tap on that. It takes us out to our camera roll, and I'm going to scroll down to a little Stackables album that I created that has some of the apps or the images that I want to work with today. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this one right here. This is an image of a little park in my neighborhood. This is what you see when you first come in. Across the top, you have different file formats that you can choose. You have a JPEG, a PNG, or a TIFF format. You can choose any of these. The JPEGs work just like any JPEGs you've worked with in the past. The TIFF files are going to create a much larger file for you. I'm going to go ahead and choose a TIFF file format, which will save things a little bit larger. Down across the bottom, you have several different file formats, or aspect ratios rather. You've got a square, 4:3, which is the standard iPhone configuration, 3:2, and so on. For this, I'm going to leave it in the original or 3:2 form or 4:3 format, so I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to leave it as it is. And to select that, I'm going to tap the green check mark in the upper right of the screen. And so now it's popped the image into the Stackables interface. And if you can tell, I'm going to press my finger on the screen. There's the original image, and when I release, there's the image that it's already applied one of the textures to the image immediately upon coming into Stackables. So let's just do a quick round the screen here to look at what these different things are. Up on the top in the left, you see a red box with a home. Tap on that. We can either return home, which takes us back to the entry screen where you can choose a new image, or you can tap start over, and it brings you back to the starting point, erasing all of the changes that you've made up to this point. So you want to be careful on how you use that. The next, across the top here, we have a number of icons. This first one, if I tap on it, it looks like a little black box with a kind of a checkerboard. I'll tap on that, and that is all of our textures that we have here to apply to this image. And you can see them over here. There's, oh gosh, I don't know, scroll down here, probably 30 or 40 of them. I have never counted, but there's quite a few. And when you first come into the image, or bring your image into Stackables, it will apply this very first texture called honey to your image. You can change it to anything else in this list, but it will default and bring you in with that initial texture applied. The next button across the top are your filters, and that's the icon with the 3 graded filter icon here, right here. I'll open that up, and these are the filters that you can apply to this image. We have, again, it defaults to the first one in the list, which in this case is Arctic Dawn, and you can choose different ones just by tapping. You can scroll to find more below it. There's just a list of these that you can select. You can see there's for just a variety of different ones. We'll come back to how to manipulate those in a minute. The next icon across the top up here is the gradient tool. If we tap on that, we have the opportunity to select varying gradients in different colors and tones. So if we take a look at, let's find one that really shows up for us here. If we take this one right here, it's a charcoal gradient, and you notice the two little arrows up in the upper left corner of that little thumbnail. If we tap on that, it changes. So now our gradient starts dense in the center and gets lighter as it goes out toward the edge of the frame. If I tap it again, now I have a gradient that is dark at the top and gradually gets lighter to the bottom. I can tap it again, and now I have a gradient that starts in the upper left corner of the image and comes down in a diagonal gradient. And then I'm back to my circular gradient with the dark on the outside. And you can choose, you can see any of these, pick another one, a different color here. You can change those just by tapping on that, the two little arrows on the thumbnail to rotate through the various gradient layers you have, or gradient filters you have. The next one here is a texture tool, or a pattern tool rather. You notice over on the left you have lots of different colors that you can select. Any of these in this palette. And you can see I can scroll. There's a lot more than appear there initially, and you can see the color changing. Over on the right here, you can see at the top it's set to plain, but each of these is a different pattern that you can apply. So let's just pick one here. Here's a kind of honeycomb pattern. Well, so when I apply that, you can see the honeycomb appearing on the image, and there are some ways that you can change the size of that and the density of all that, and we'll get to that in a second. But here's another one. So when you choose a color over here, you're actually choosing the color of the pattern that you've selected. So that's the patterns. The next icon up here at the top are the adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on that. The adjustments, this is very similar to what you would see in other apps, Snapseed, whatever. And if we look over here on the right, we can scroll down. There's a color adjust at the top. There's an auto adjust. And then there are some other things that we can do here. There's a grain texture that we can add. There's a vignette that we can add on the image. And again, with the vignette, you'll notice those little arrows. I can tap on those and I can change it to a light outer edge or a dark outer edge just by tapping. I can choose sepia tone, all of these different ones. That you also have some really cool tools in here where you can do depth of field, for example. So if I were to select on depth of field here, you notice how it's blurring the image and it's giving focusing on a part of the image but blurring the rest of it. Now we'll get into a minute about how you control that. But I want you to see all these different adjustments first. So sometimes I will process an image in Snapseed before I bring it into Stackables, because I want to do all of those fundamental edits before I begin to do textures and filters and other things. But you really, with this app, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do a lot of that adjustment right here in Stackables. So right now we are on that adjustments icon, the one with the sliders at the top, and over here on the top you see the color adjust. Well, if I tap on that, I have a whole bunch of different options that I can apply to this image. By going down below, I have a button on the left. I've got brightness, contrast, saturation, vibrance, hue, exposure, gamma, white balance, shadows, highlights, etc., sharpening, and then opacity. So just with this color adjust tool, you have the opportunity to make all those kinds of adjustments on your image right here. So sometimes if I haven't taken an image into Snapseed first, I'll start here with the adjustments and make some of those adjustments here. One of the reasons I don't do that a lot is because, again, one of the limitations of this app, just as the Formulas app has, you cannot pinch and zoom with this app. So I can't enlarge this to see how things look. So a lot of those kinds of adjustments that I might do in Snapseed or somewhere else, I'd actually rather do them in Snapseed, because there I can zoom in and see what I'm doing. Here I really can't. So you do have the option, but I don't often do it. The other thing that you have the option to use is the Auto Adjust tool. So again, we're still in the sliders, the adjustment sliders. The second tool down is Auto Adjust. So I can tap on Auto Adjust, and it is going to set a variety of different adjustments to that image. I don't always use it, but sometimes it's a quick fix, and if it looks good, I'll go with it. The next icon up here, the Formulas icon, when I tap on that, I'm prompted with a dialog box that warns me that if I switch categories to the Formulas category, I'll lose all the changes that I've made, the edits that I've made to the existing image. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes to that. And when I do, I'm now in the Formulas category. And you can see over here on the bottom, we have a beaker with a gear on it. And this is the category with all of the formulas that come with the Stackables app. The next icon here with the star on it, these also come with the Formulas app, but these were created by various artists from around the world that have been selected by the folks that create Stackables and chosen to include in their list. The next category is the one with the heart on it. When I select that, all of these formulas are formulas that I've created myself and applied and saved as formulas in this app. Interestingly, when you save a formula in Stackables, the next time you open up the Formulas app, the companion app, you will find your formula in the Formulas app to be applied to images there. So just a really neat connection between these two apps. Another fun thing with this, if you look down at the very bottom of the of where your own formulas are, there's a little envelope down there. You can tap on that, and you can actually select a formula to send and share with the folks at who create Stackables, and they will review it for inclusion in their featured formulas category. So that's kind of a fun thing you might try if you create a cool formula that you like a lot. All right, so we've just gone across the top, and we've looked at the home button to take us back or load a new image. We've looked at the texture section here. We've looked at the filter section here, the gradient tool, the pattern tool, the adjustments tool, and then ultimately the formula tool. So now let's get into taking a look at how we would edit an image with this tool. So let's just start by going over here to the sliders icon on the top and go over to our color adjust. And once I select that, if you look down at the bottom, you have an icon on the left that looks like a sun. If I tap on that, this is where I can make adjustments to the brightness and so on. So let's just brighten this image a little bit. I'll select brightness, and I've got a slider here that lets me darken it or brighten it. And I may want to brighten it maybe just a tiny bit. The next thing, I can tap on that again, and now I can go and look at the contrast. I might want to just explore how the contrast affects this image a little bit. And I think I'm going to drop the contrast a little bit because I know I'm going to add some textures to this in a second. So then I tap it again. If we've got saturation, I can drop the saturation and lose all that color in the sky, or I can increase the saturation a little bit, and I'm bringing out the blueness. It was a winter day and it was cool, and you can see kind of the blue coming out in the sky. So I might want to increase that a little bit. Vibrance, you can play with the vibrance of your color. And let's go hue. I'm not going to mess with exposure. Again, we can brighten or darken. I kind of want to darken a little bit because I like the sky. Brings out, I don't want to blow out those highlights in the sky. And then you have your white balance where you can either warm the image up or cool it off, depending. And this is handy if you're shooting indoors under different light conditions and so on. You can find a white balance that suits the conditions that the image was shot in. Highlights are probably okay. We'll leave that down. If we were to take our highlights up, oh, I guess it was all the way. Yeah, sorry. It's kind of counterintuitive. This is one of the things about this I was saying. If we turn this all the way up, we're dropping those highlights. If we bring it all the way back, we're raising them. You'd think it'd be the other way around. But you can see how dropping those highlights darkens the image and enrichens the sky a little bit. And so on and so on. This is shadows, same thing here. Make adjustments to your shadows. You also have sharpening here. Again, this is one I don't typically like to do in this app because I can't enlarge and see how the sharpening is affecting the image, but you do have that capability. Finally, at the very end, you have an opacity slider, and you have this in most of the tools. It allows you to tone down the impact of the effects you've just made by making them more or less opaque. So you always have that option, I think, on just about every tool in here. Okay, so we've just made our the adjustments that we want to make to the image before we start doing our texturing and layering. Well, we in order to commit to these changes, what we have to do is create a new layer. If you notice down below here at the bottom, it says layer 1. If I tap on that, you can see that there's nothing below it. We have only one layer here. So if I add another layer now, I'm ready to do another layer of adjustments. I'm going to tap the plus sign, add a layer, and it's automatically going to apply the color adjust, the first adjustment in the list of adjustments. So now what I want to do is I want to apply a texture. So I'm now in layer 2, and you can see down below it says layer 2, and I'm going to go over to the checkerboard icon at the top, which is our textures. And now I'm going to scroll through here and play around and look and see if there's something that I like in the textures. And here's where it gets interesting. So let's say we choose this thorny rose texture. Well, if we go down to the bottom here, over on the far right, you see a circle with arrows and a 0 in the circle. What this is going to allow me to do, as I tap on that, watch what happens. It's going to change from 0 to 90. What we've just done is turn the texture that's on top of this image by 90 degrees. So I'll do it again, and it goes to 180. So what we're doing is simply watch the image. There we're back to 0. There's 90 degrees. It's just changing the position of the texture over the image. So basically you're getting 4 different variations of the same texture on your image. You can choose from one of 4 because you can choose from any of these orientations, which is really useful sometimes if the particular part of a texture that you want it in the top part of the image instead of the foreground. You can switch it around by playing with this rotation feature. You will not find this in the filters or gradients or some of the others, but it is available in the texture feature that we are in right now, the checkerboard icon. So in addition, down below you have other controls. Again, we're in the texture mode, and we're adjusting the texture that's currently applied to the image. If I tap on the circle on the left, you'll see that I have 2 different things that I can adjust. I can adjust the opacity, which is going to intensify or relax the intensity of that filter or texture rather that's laid on this image. So you can see there's at 100%, you can see a lot of that texture. Let's just leave it there for now so we can really see it. If I tap on that circle again on the left, I also have the ability to desaturate that texture. So I'm going to tap on desaturate. Right now it's at 100%. You can see all the purple and everything that's in that particular texture. But if I back it off, you can see I'm toning down the color intensity of that particular texture. So you can play around with this. You can get it to where you want it. You can choose multiple. Let's just try something different. Here's another one. There's so many different ones. This is one I like. I mean, you'll find favorites perhaps, but each one is going to interact differently with each image that you have. And I'm just flipping that one around and seeing. I kind of like that right there. And I can intensify that. That's the desaturation. I go back to my opacity and kind of tone it down a little bit. And there we go. So now you notice right now you don't see any of the controls on the right side of the screen. They've disappeared. Well, all I have to do to bring them back is tap my finger on the right side of the screen. I'll do it again. If I tap out on the center part of the screen, the tools slide out of the way so I can see my image. But if I tap over again on the right side of the phone, there are my tools. So a couple other things to talk about here, and this is true with all of these different tools that you'll encounter in Stackables. This is what I was talking about when I said it was really complex. You notice over here at the top, these are all our textures. Down here at the bottom, we have our layers. If I tap on this layer icon, it shows me we have layer 1 and layer 2. And do you see the eyeball on layer 2? If I tap the eyeball, it turns that layer off. So I can see what it looks like without that layer applied. So I'll turn it back on, and there you can see it again. Above my layers, you notice it says overlay. If I tap on overlay, what it's going to reveal, all of these are blend modes. And these are blend modes that you'll find in other apps. You'll find it in, well, if you use Photoshop or other desktop software, you'll find them there, but you'll also find them in iPhone apps like Image Blender, Superimpose, things like that. These are standard modes. So there's normal at the top, overlay, soft light, and what these do is govern how that layer is going to interact with the image. So watch what happens when I switch. Right now we're in overlay mode. If I tap normal, now we've really got a different kind of blending going on. Now I can still use my slider here at the bottom to negotiate, how that's going to look, and I can even play with saturation. But you can see if I go from normal to overlay, it changes it quite a bit. If we go down to, you can page through all these and become familiar with how they work. A lot of times, if you just dial them up all the way so you can see how they play, you can see how this same texture that we have, this grunge floor texture, is going to look different if it's in normal mode versus overlay mode versus soft light and so on. And look at how many there are. You've got luminosity down here, which gives another look, and each of these might require some different adjustments. You've got exclusion. So you really want to play with these and see how they work, but you can see how it gives you so much variety in what you select as you're processing your image. So let's go back to overlay where we started and kind of set that back to where we had it, kind of about right there. So there's our image right now. And what we've done, let's go back. I'll tap on the right side to bring our tools back, and let's go look at our layers. So we have layer 1 where we did some of our adjustments to the image, like sharpening and some things like that. And then layer 2, we added this texture. Well, now we want to do yet another edit to add another layer and another edit to the image. To do that, we want to go down and hit the plus again because we want to add another layer. So I'm going to tap add layer, and again we're in the texture tool when we did that, so it's going to apply this honey texture to the image, which is that first texture in this list over here on the right. So now we can decide, what do we want to do next? Do we want to do another texture, which we could do. Sometimes you'll find yourself layering texture upon texture to get these really rich looks. Or we could go to, instead of a texture, we could go to the filters. And we could begin to play around with these filters. So now, like there's the Arctic Dawn filter. It's given this thing a really kind of dark look and very moody. Now you'll notice we are now in the filters section, which is these 3 dots up at the top in the top row. You notice I can't use the rotation. It doesn't let me rotate the filter, nor when I tap over on the left, there are no other tools here. The only thing I can do in the filter mode here is adjust the opacity by sliding this back and forth. And again, you've got all these different things down here. You've got a black and white you can apply and dial that down. So you can take a color image and dial it back to where you're only letting a little of the color come through. You can see, here's one that really brings out some of the colors in the image, in the other textures. So I'm going to just leave it there for now, but you see how we've done that. So now the next thing I want to do, I want to add yet another layer. So I'm going to tap on the plus again. I'm going to add a layer, and this time let's see, I want to go to the gradient layer, so the gradient tool. So that's the one in the very center, that right there, and I'm going to choose a gradient that allows me to kind of vignette this a little bit. So I'm going to go to this charcoal gradient. I'm going to dial this up, and you can see I've kind of got, if I take it all the way down and I can begin to bring it up, you can see I'm kind of vignetting the outer edges of the image. That is one way to achieve a vignette. Now again, I could, if I chose, I could play around with these blend modes and say, well, maybe it looks better if it's soft light or hard light. There's a very different look. There's hard light versus overlay. I kind of like that. The hard light's kind of cool. It gives it a different tone. So you've got so many different ways to really find that look you're going for. So once you've got this all together and you're ready to save, if we go up here to the green icon on the upper right with the square with the arrow in it, I'm going to tap on that, and you notice there are several different things you can do. We can post this to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or email, which I rarely ever do. What I end up doing most of the time is saving to the camera roll. So let's do that first. I'm going to just tap Save to the camera roll, and it'll think about this for a minute, and it has just saved this image out to my camera roll. But let's say I really like this particular formula that I've created that is comprised of these 4 layers over here that we did, and I want to save it to apply to other images. So I'm going to tap on the Save icon again at the top, and you notice the very first thing in the list is Save Edits as a formula. So I'm going to save my edits, and it's going to ask me to name it. So I'm going to call it, if I could spell, Stackables tutorial. And then I'm going to hit save, and now that particular formula has been saved into the formulas tool. So if we go up and tap on the formulas icon, the beaker up there at the top right, and it's going to ask me, do you want to switch to the formulas category, and all that stuff you've done is going to be lost. I'm going to say yes, because I know I've already saved this image to the camera roll, and I've also created it as a formula. So I'm going to say yes. And now when I go to, I believe it's the heart, if I scroll down to the very bottom, no, where is it? Maybe it's in, what did I call it? Stackables. Oh, it's the very first one, sorry. So it's the very first one, and it's applied to this image. Now, you can pull in other images and apply the same formula to that image. And then once you've chosen this, if you look down at the bottom, you'll see a wrench. If I tap on the wrench icon, it brings my tools back. So now I'm no longer in the formulas mode, I'm back into my editing mode. So I can begin to, I can either go down to each of these layers that exist and say, okay, I want to make some adjustments there. Maybe I want to make some adjustments to how that layer is playing there. I can go down to layer 3 where I've chosen this, what's it say, waterfall light. So each time I tap on the layer, it's showing me in the very first cell up here what adjustment has been done. And below, I have the controls for that adjustment. So I can now, I've applied a formula to my image, but now I'm going in and tweaking each of those layers to make fine-tuning adjustments to that image. And now I can also continue adding layers. So I could hit the plus sign, I could choose add a layer, and now it's going to, because I was in the gradient tool when I chose to add another layer, it's showing me and applying this gradient to the image. So I could either stay here and continue to, you know, use one of these gradients in my image if I chose. There's a kind of a sideways gradient. I don't know if I like that or not. You can play it, turn it up a little bit. So you can see there's another, or we don't have to stay in the gradients. We could, in layer 5, we could switch over to one of the other tools and add a texture or a filter or a pattern or whatever. Let's see. So let's go ahead and let's say you get in here and you've got, right now you can see we have we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. Well, let's say I want to see what is that layer 5 really doing to my image. Well, if I tap on the little eyeball there, it's just turned off layer 5. I can turn layer 5 back on and see how it's adding that kind of lavender tone and brightening the image. It's really making the image different in a way that I don't really like. I want to get rid of that layer. So I'm on layer 5. I'm going to tap I'm going to tap the green icon at the top, and I'm going to choose, oops, I'm sorry, I told you wrong. I'm going to go tap the plus, and I can either add another layer, duplicate a layer, or I can delete a layer. If I delete the layer, it'll ask me, are you sure you want to delete it? And I can delete it, and now layer 5 is gone, and I only have 4 layers. The other thing that I can do here, I can flatten my layers. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers left. Let's say I want to flatten those. And this is the same thing that happens in Snapseed when you save using the export button. It's going to flatten all those layers and save the image out to your camera roll. It's the same thing as flattening layers in Photoshop or some other applications that you might use. So I'm going to go ahead and tap flatten layers, and it'll ask you, are you sure you want to flatten them? This action can't be undone. So once you've flattened it, you're not going to be able to edit any of those layers that you've already created here. So I'm going to flatten it, and now I have one layer, and that layer consists of basically all of those 4 layers combined, and I cannot edit that layer. Now I can choose different filters to apply to that layer. I can choose different textures and so on. I can come over and play with these other tools. I can add things on top of that layer, or I can choose to add a new layer and continue to edit. So there's our image. This is where we start. No, I'm sorry. This is the flattened version of it. This is the change we just made to the flattened version. If we were to, let's go ahead and save that to the camera roll. And now, let's say we want to kind of go back to the formula that we created. So I'm going to tap on the formula icon. I'll choose yes, I want to switch to formulas, and then I can go back to my the heart icon, and I can apply that formula to the image we brought in. So right now what we're seeing, this is really kind of wacky, I didn't intend this, but what we've done is apply the formula on top of the flattened image that has all those stacks. So it's like double the impact of those initial 4 layers. So there they are. So now I can go in here, I can edit those, I can tone them down, I could delete them, I can desaturate some of the color in those, and I can just go to each layer and make additional adjustments. So now we've got an image that's even further from where it started. So let me go ahead and save that to the camera roll. Okay. So let's go out and look at these. So here's one of the first saves that we did of that image. I really like that. And then here's another save where we darkened things a little bit, gave it a darker vignette. And then here's another one. This is the last one we did where everything just got really complicated in terms of how many layers were on top of layers. So those are just some of the ways that you can work these images. Let's just go through one more real quickly, and then we'll stop. I'm going to go back up to Stackables, and I'm going to tap on the home button, and I'm going to return home because I want to start over. I'm going to get a new image. So let's go tap there. Let's go to the album I created down here, and let's choose, I don't know, let's choose this barn, Indiana barn here. I'll switch to TIFF. I'm going to choose the TIFF file format, and I don't really want to change. I could change it to a square, I guess, or 3:2, but I'm going to leave it at its original, and click the green check, and there's our image inside Stackables. The honey texture is applied because that's the first one in the list, and I may want to go over to my adjustments here real quick and maybe change the contrast a tiny bit, and I don't even know, let's just drop the saturation. So we could just drop it down even more so it's kind of a has less color intensity. And so I'm just doing a few little things here. Let's go over here to sharpen, which is down here in the end, and I'll sharpen a little bit. Again, I don't typically like to sharpen in here because I can't see what I'm doing. I can't enlarge, but there's before the adjustments and there's after. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to tap on the side to bring my tools back, and I'm ready to do another layer. So I'll tap the plus sign. I'll say add a layer, and this time I'm going to go to the textures over here under the checkerboard icon there, and I'm going to choose a texture that floats my boat here. And again, a lot of times it's a matter of looking and exploring, and as you're doing these, just remember your sliders down here may be in different positions that and are going to affect how it looks. So here is, and again, I'm just tapping on the screen to remove and bring back the toolbar. So I'll tap it so I can see, and if I tap on the left circle down here at the bottom, you can see I've got opacity, which is where I'm at now, and I can drop the intensity of that texture, and I can also desaturate it if I want a little bit. And again, we're talking about the texture, not the image in this case. Okay, so oh, I don't know, I don't like that. Let's go to something like this maybe. So now we've got just a little bit more texture in there. It's a little different, but now I want to add another layer. So I'll tap on the plus sign again. I'll add a layer, and again, I'm still in texture, so it's going to by default apply that first honey texture, but that's not what I want. I want to go to my filters, second icon. Ooh, and now we're talking. We're getting some really interesting drama in the image. And again, to show the before and after, I'm just lightly pressing on the screen. There's the before and there's the after. And again, because we are now in the filters, the only thing I can do to my filters is affect the opacity. I can't rotate the texture, nor can I change the saturation levels. I can only deal with opacity. Now, if I wanted to go back to layer 2, where I had this texture applied, I could rotate the texture a little bit. There's one rotation, Let me rotate it again. There's another rotation and another rotation and one last one. And I guess I like it right there at 0. And again, you can make those intensity, opacity adjustments, or desaturate it a little bit. So that's looking good. And let's add one more layer. And again, we're in textures, so it's applying that honey, but let's do a gradient of some kind. And let's choose, I don't know, something like a darker gradient like that. I can already tell by looking at that I've probably over sharpened it, so we want to go back and fix that in a minute. But let's see, kind of like that rich, that's a little better. So there's kind of a gradient in the sky, and again, all I can do, I can't rotate that gradient from here. I can only change the opacity. So let's go back in our layers, and let's go to that very first layer where we did the sharpening, because I can tell by just watching, look at the branches there, even though I can't zoom in on that, I can pretty much tell it's too sharpened. So I'm going to go in here to my sharpen icon, and I'm going to back that off considerably. See how the difference, maybe just a little bit, but not a lot. And there. So there's our before and there's our after. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that to the camera roll. And let's also save this as a formula. So I'll tap on the save icon again at the top. And this time I'll choose Save Edits as a Formula. And I'll call it Barn 5, because I've got several in there. And I'll save that. And now, if we go get a brand new image, and we'll go out here, and we'll get, let's get this image right here of the cemetery, and I'll tap TIFF, and I'm going to go directly to my formulas icon this time. So I'll tap on formulas, ask me if I want to switch, and I say yep. And now I go to my heart over here, and there's my barn. I can apply that. Oops, where'd it go? Why is it not applying that? That's weird. Okay, well, it's making a liar out of me. It should be applying that texture. Let's just see what's going on. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to go back out here. I'm going to choose a different image just because I don't want to be made crazy. Let's choose this barn image here. Change it to a TIFF. I'm going to go to formulas, say yes, go to my formulas, and there. That, I don't know why I didn't apply it on that other image. That's kind of weird, but there's that formula that we created called Barn 2, or Barn 5 rather, applied to this image. Now I can go down to the wrench and I can begin working with each of these layers. By selecting a layer, I can play with the texture a little bit. I can desaturate that texture. I can play with this layer 5, which is my that Arctic Dawn. I can drop it back a little bit, or I could increase it too, I guess. That's kind of interesting. Then I could go down to my layer 4, which is that gradient, and maybe I want to switch to a different color gradient. Oh, that's not going to work. That's kind of interesting there. So you got a little bit brighter image altogether. But you can see the hue and the tone is different. So you've got just so many different ways. Now, so also I'm rotating that texture a little bit. That's kind of okay like that. So I can go ahead and save that to the camera roll. And so that's essentially the things. Those are some of the things that I wanted to show you with this. It's just a very, very complex and wonderful app for creating textures and layers. One last thing before I go that I want to show you. Last time we were working with the app Formulas, and here it is over here. It's this one in the second row of my tray. I'm going to tap on it here and open it up, and this is Formulas. When I go in and select an image from, oh gosh, let's just take this one, and I select that, and now I'm in Formulas. If I go to the beaker icon here, and I go to my Stackables library, look what's there, Barn 5. So now I'm in an entirely different app, and I've got that formula that was created in Formulas now, or in Stackables, now in my Formulas app where I can apply it to new images. Okay, so wow, that was quite the tour. I hope you find some use in this, and have fun with it as I do, and just keep exploring. And in another tutorial or one of my webinars, we'll go into this even deeper and kind of unveil some of the other aspects of this this rich app. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being here today, and until next time, have fun shooting.